How did an underground rapper from a neighborhood plagued by systemic neglect transform himself into one of hip-hop's most revered business strategists? Today, we aren't just telling a story of fame, we're dissecting a blueprint. We're going back to the concrete of Crenshaw, where a young Ermias Asghedom didn't just survive, he planned. Most artists spend their careers chasing the industry. Nipsey Hussle spent his building a wall around his own kingdom. Welcome to part one of our 4-part series on the life, the mind, and the legacy of a revolutionary. This is the story of how the marathon began and why it never really ended. Welcome to Hip Hop History Vault. To understand the icon, you have to understand the soil he was planted in. Ermias Asghedom was born on August 15, 1985, into a Crenshaw neighborhood defined by a stark reality, immense struggle coupled with incredible untapped ambition. South Central Los Angeles in the late 1980s was a place of deep cultural complexity. This was the era of the crack epidemic's peak, a period where the social fabric of the community was stretched to the absolute breaking point. Systematic divestment meant that resources were scarce, schools were underfunded, and the looming presence of gang culture was an inescapable part of daily life. However, Ermias did not view Crenshaw solely through the lens of victimization. He witnessed the profound resilience of the people around him, neighbors working 3 jobs just to keep the lights on, the unwavering strength of the local matriarchs, and his own father, Dawit Asghedom. Dawit was an immigrant from Eritrea, a country that had fought a brutal, long-term war for its own independence. Dawit brought those values, the values of Eritrean pride, fierce discipline, and the absolute necessity of self-reliance into the heart of South Central. Ermias grew up in the rolling 60s neighborhood territory. This wasn't just a place to live, it was a high-stakes education. He navigated a world where the wrong turn or the wrong association could have lifelong consequences. This environment forced him to develop a hyper-awareness of his surroundings, a street intelligence that would later translate directly into his business strategy. He wasn't just observing street politics, he was analyzing them. He observed how the local economy functioned, the dynamics of supply and demand, and the heavy price of poor management. This duality, the street realism he lived, and the disciplined intellectual inheritance from his father defined his entire worldview. He wasn't seeking a way out of Crenshaw. He was seeking a way up for Crenshaw. He realized early on that the system provided little for his community, and that the only true path to power was through the creation of his own economy. He didn't just see the neighborhood, he saw the mechanisms behind it. He saw how poverty was manufactured and how opportunity was withheld. He noticed how the corner store operated, how the local entrepreneurs thrived, and how those who didn't plan for the future were quickly left behind. This was an education you couldn't get in a classroom. It was an education written in the language of the streets. This perspective, a blend of street survival and entrepreneurial ambition, was the bedrock of everything he would go on to achieve. As Ermias transitioned into his teenage years, the street was calling, but so was something else, music. Music became his primary vehicle for expression. He found his voice, not in a glossy corporate studio, but with the Slauson Boys. The Slauson Boys were more than just a rap collective. They were a brotherhood. They were the voices of the streets, attempting to articulate the daily life of young men in South Central. This crew was his genuine training ground. They had essentially zero resources, borrowed beat tapes, and the raw hunger to be heard. This period taught Nipsey the power of collective ambition. In these sessions, he learned how to feed off the creative energy of his peers, how to build a collaborative environment, and how to structure a narrative that genuinely resonated with his community. This was the early 2000s, a time when the LA hip-hop landscape was in flux. The mainstream media was pushing a certain version of LA, but the Slauson Boys were trying to show the LA they knew. They spent countless hours in cramped rooms, honing their craft, sharing their experiences, and trying to find the perfect cadence that would capture the reality of their existence. It was intense, it was authentic, and it was entirely theirs. Nipsey's early work during this period, his flow, his cadences, and the way he structured his verses began to take shape under the influence of this crew. He learned that to be truly heard in a saturated market, you didn't need to be the loudest or the most flash forward. You needed to be the most authentic. If you weren't speaking the truth of the block wouldn't respect you. This period established his reputation as the voice of the people, the cornerstone of the legend that was yet to come. He was absorbing everything, treating every studio session as an audition for his own future, never losing sight of the fact that he was refining a tool that he intended to use to dismantle the very barriers that kept his neighborhood down. He understood that the music was the medium, but the message was the mission. He was not just developing a flow, he was developing a perspective. He learned how to command attention without needing to rely on gimmicks or trends. He was building his craft from the ground up, one verse at a time, and in doing so, he was building the foundation of a career that would eventually change the industry itself. Before streaming, before social media algorithms dictated who got heard, there was the grind. And for Nipsey, the mixtape grind was the lifeblood of his career. He understood that music was not just an artistic expression, it was a product, and the mixtape was his primary marketing engine. Between 2005 and 2008, Nipsey released the Slauson Boy volumes, and then he exploded onto the scene with the Bullets Ain't Got No Name series. This was the era of the truly hands-on hustle. Nipsey was physically present, handing out his own mixtapes, talking to the people who were actually listening and understanding his audience in a way that modern artists, shielded by social media managers, rarely do. He didn't just rely on local notoriety. He treated every single mixtape release like a major campaign. He wasn't waiting for a label to tell him it was his time. He was creating a direct, unbreakable line of communication with his fan base. Every mixtape was a statement, every verse was a diary entry, and every sale was a confirmation that he was on the right path. He knew the importance of brand consistency. The covers were gritty, the messaging was sharp, and the distribution was relentless. This period established his reputation as a man of his word. If you bought a Nipsey mixtape, you knew exactly what you were getting. Truth, grit, and unparalleled authenticity. This level of fan engagement was the precursor to the massive business moves he would make later. He learned that the fans were not just consumers, they were investors in his journey. This was the genesis of his proud to pay philosophy, years before it became a branded campaign. He understood that loyalty is the most expensive commodity in business, and he was working tirelessly to earn it, one mixtape at a time, building an infrastructure of support that could eventually sustain him, even when the rest of the industry tried to ignore him. He was not just selling tapes, he was selling himself, his values, his vision, and his commitment to the grind. He was testing the market, finding out what resonated, and sharpening his pitch. This wasn't just a hustle, it was a doctoral program in marketing, distribution, and consumer psychology. He was learning how to build a brand that could survive and thrive independently, and he was doing it on the toughest stage imaginable. By 2008, the industry giants were knocking on his door. Nipsey was signed to Cinematic Music Group in partnership with Epic Records. It was the dream deal, or so it seemed to the outside world. But Nipsey, ever the student of business and economics, was reading the fine print. He discovered the core reality of the music industry. It's built on exploitation. The standard model for artists is simple but lethal. They give you an advance to make you feel wealthy, but in exchange, they own your masters. They own the intellectual property. They own your brand. He saw this as the modern equivalent of sharecropping. He refused to be a product of a system that didn't have his community's best interests at heart. He took the most dangerous, unconventional step a young artist could take. He walked away. He turned down multi-million-dollar advances. To the corporate world, this was incomprehensible. It was seen as professionally suicidal. But to Nipsey, it was the only logical decision if he valued his future. He wasn't just interested in the money on the table today. He was intensely interested in the control he would have tomorrow. He decided that if he was going to fail, he would fail on his own terms, not for a label that could shelve his career at a moment's notice to protect their quarterly earnings. He understood a fundamental rule that most young artists miss. True wealth is not just cash flow, it is equity. By walking away, he was rejecting the short-term comfort of a paycheck for the long-term potential of owning his own destiny. This was a radical act of self-belief. He chose the slow, arduous road of independence because he knew that in the long run, it was the only way to retain his voice, his vision, and the ability to leverage his brand into something that would benefit his people, rather than just the corporate shareholders who had never stepped foot in his neighborhood. He realized that the labels were selling a dream that ultimately required the artists to surrender their soul, their intellectual property, and their creative control. He wouldn't do it. He knew he could do it better, faster, and more authentically on his own terms. He was betting on himself, not just on his ability to rap, but on his ability to run a business, to build a brand, and to create an infrastructure that could support not just himself, but the community that had raised him. It was a terrifying gamble, but one he knew he had to take. Then came October 8th, 2013. Nipsey Hussle did the impossible. He dropped Crenshaw, a project he made available for free digitally. But for those who wanted a physical copy, he charged $100. The industry laughed. They called him arrogant. They called it a publicity stunt. But Nipsey wasn't trying to sell music. He was selling allegiance. He knew that his truest fans, the ones who had followed him through the mixtape grind, would support a man who stayed true to his message. He didn't just sell out of the 1,000 copies he printed, he did it within a day. Jay-Z, recognizing that a new business paradigm had just been birthed, bought 100 copies for $10,000. This was the ultimate proof of concept. Nipsey Hussle didn't need a label. He had a community. He had created an economic loop where the fan invested in the artist and the artist invested back in the neighborhood. This was not just a mixtape. It was a statement. It was the $100 gamble that changed hip-hop economics forever, proving that value is not dictated by the market, but by the artist. He took a commodity that the internet had made virtually worthless, the physical mixtape, and through branding, exclusivity, and emotional connection, made it infinitely valuable to the right audience. He showed that you don't need 1 million casual listeners if you have 1,000 dedicated, invested fans who believe in your mission. This was the moment Nipsey stopped being just a rapper and started being a legitimate economic force. He had validated his own worth, and by extension, the worth of everyone who had supported him from the start. He was not just selling a mixtape. He was selling the idea of independence, of ownership, and of a sustainable model for artists to thrive without sacrificing their integrity. He was challenging the industry's hegemony, showing that the power had shifted from the corporate executives in boardrooms to the creators in the streets. He proved that you could charge a premium for your art, provided you were charging for the value of the connection, not just the content. It was a revolutionary moment, and it set the stage for everything he would go on to achieve as an entrepreneur. He had demonstrated that he was not just a participant in the economy, he was an architect of it. The success of Crenshaw was the absolute catalyst. It allowed Nipsey to move from being an independent rapper to being an independent entrepreneur. He launched the Marathon, not just as a clothing line, but as a holistic philosophy. The Marathon stood for patience, discipline, and the refusal to succumb to the get-rich-quick mentality that ruins so many lives in the hood. He opened the Marathon clothing store in his old neighborhood, not just to sell merchandise, but to act as a community anchor. He was hiring people from the neighborhood, mentoring the local youth, and teaching them that ownership is the only path to liberation. He was using his music as the fuel to build the engine, the real estate, the retail space, and the economic infrastructure that Crenshaw had been denied for decades. He was showing the world that you don't have to leave the hood to be successful. You can rebuild it from the inside.
I think like the whole theme of what like the marathon concept is and all that is just about being the best that you could be. Not even without nothing, just like reaching your potential and pushing yourself to be, the best version of yourself. With your hustle, with your music, with what you believe in, and your actions. I think that's the concept of the marathon in general. I think that's what people connect to, is that it's like a soundtrack for when you want to demand the most from yourself. This the music you get on when you want to tighten your game up and be the sharpest version of yourself. And you know what I'm saying? Get your money right and get your mind right and get your shit right. You'll probably put that marathon shit on. You know what I'm saying?
This was the core of the marathon. It wasn't about the finish line. It was about the resilience required to stay on the path day after day, regardless of the obstacles. He was setting a precedent that an artist could be a titan of industry without sacrificing their roots, their soul, or their community's well-being. He was creating a model that others could replicate, a blueprint for success based on the very principles he'd been advocating since he first started the Sloss on Boys. It was an ambitious, radical vision, but for Nipsey, it was the only way forward. He understood that true success meant lifting others as he climbed. He was focused on creating sustainable wealth within the community, on building businesses that would provide employment, opportunity, and hope to the residents of Crenshaw. He was a visionary who saw the potential in people that others overlooked, and he was dedicated to providing the tools and the platform they needed to realize that potential. He was not just building a brand, he was building a legacy, a sustainable, community-focused empire that would outlast his own music. He was the living embodiment of his philosophy, a man who ran his marathon with intention, integrity, and a relentless focus on the future. And he was just getting started. Part 1 of our marathon is complete. We've seen the foundation, the grind, and the refusal to be owned, but the marathon was just beginning. In part 2, we're going to look at how he scaled this philosophy, how he dealt with the pressures of fame, and the complex reality of being an icon in the very neighborhood you're trying to save. Did you know that Jay-Z bought 100 copies of Crenshaw? It was one of the most underrated business moves in hip-hop history. What do you think about Nipsey's $100 mixtape strategy? Could it work in today's streaming-dominated landscape? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If this deep dive into Nipsey's origins was valuable, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Hip Hop History Vault. We'll see you in part 2. Keep running the marathon.